Welcome at yet another Tech Talk here at bestofhighendcom with our special guest Bruno Putzijs. Welcome, Bruno.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, no problem. Second topic, we continue on the Class D topic. We already covered the history, so let's talk about the present. What's there to say about Class D amplification today?
Well, for me, the present of Class D actually started in the mid noughties, so to speak, when let's say it became an accepted fact that self-oscillating amplifiers were the way forward for Class D designs, and not the variety of digital contraptions and so on. So at some point it simply became accepted that if you wanted to have good audio performance, then this is the type of amplifier that you will use. And as I mentioned already, one company, one of the early ones, Ice Power, that started selling self-oscillating amplifiers. You have Pascal Audio sell self-oscillating amplifiers. And then, of course, there's Hypex and Purify. So basically all the modules that are targeted quite specifically at least hi-fi performance up to ultra high-end performance. They're all self-oscillating amplifiers, and that is kind of that is no longer no longer a contentious issue at all. No. Whether that should be the way to do it, and those manufacturers who initially had amplifiers without global feedback or with mixed feedback, they've all converted their designs into global feedback by now. So it actually means that all those parties, they are actually quite close in terms of how the amplifier fundamentally operates. There are some there are some constant strides being made in audio performance, and of course I take some pride in always trying to scoop the other guys, but essentially what we are seeing now is that even how should I say, the lowest performing of my competitors still produce amplifiers that are perfectly fine to listen to, that would be perfectly happy to design into an audio product. And so that to me is kind of the present, more so than what I would call these gradual improvements. As I said, in my particular case, I started with something which I called UCD, and then the next thing I called Encore, and the next thing I called Eigentakt. Next thing after that, I still called Eigentakt because I ran out of inspiration. But that's just my personal timeline. Everyone else I know, they also make similar steps forward. And for many audiophiles, those little steps are big revolutions, whereas for us Class D designers, they're evolution. It's just you learn new things and you make an improvement, and it measures better, and yippee, it also sounds better. So so what's not to like? But it's all in a day's work. So
so that's merely a question of further refining.
It is further refinement, and that is actually that's a message that is not really much loved in the high end audio community, because they very much like novelty, and so that kind of explains why, for instance, they like when there's, say, new material science happening. For instance, loudspeaker drivers with a new type of material for the cone or something like that. And in the case of Class D amplifiers, it's gallium nitride FETs. Because they feel that suddenly this is going to upset the whole apple cart, and things are going to be done differently. But actually, it turns out not to be the case. In actual fact, I think let's get this out of the way first. Gallium nitride FETs especially at higher voltages, are definitely faster and easier to work with than silicon. So if you ask me, if you'd asked me today, make a 1 or 2 kilowatt Class D amplifier, I wouldn't dream of using a silicon FET. I would immediately use gallium nitride. Period. But that is simply because they are easier to drive. They don't have what's called recovered charge when switching hard and so on. So, but they are not. But other than that, they are not qualitatively or fundamentally different from any other any other FET technology. And in actual fact, one of the claims that is often being made in Class D circles about gallium nitride, what I mean, not Class D circles, I mean amateur Class D circles, is like gallium nitrides are much faster. Well, they can be, especially in high power switch mode power supplies, but in actual fact, it's not a good idea to run them much faster than silicon FETs in a Class D power stage, because if you do, the amount of energy that you lose in charging and discharging the internal capacitance of that FET increases. What you normally do is you turn a FET off, and then you, especially at low signal levels, you turn a FET off, and then the output choke will actually cause the output voltage to transition to the other side before you've even turned the other FET on. If you are going to force the matter, then that energy that is being recycled through the coil there is no longer being recycled. It's being thrown away. So I mean, especially with Class D amplifiers being more and more powerful, you actually want their efficiency, or that, let's say, their losses at low signal levels to be ever smaller and smaller relative to their maximum output power, because we might love to have a 500 watt amplifier sitting there, but we don't love if it is dissipating 20 watts just by being turned on. And that is what happens if you try and switch too fast. And so if you do a rational design with gallium nitride FETs, you end up with a design which does not fundamentally perform much better than one with silicon FETs, but one which is much smaller, and one which is much more efficient at really high powers. So it has tremendous advantages, just not the revolutionary ones that audiophiles impute on them. So in that respect, so I would almost I would also have to disappoint people, is that there is that we are asymptotically reaching a point where more and more Class D amplifiers from more and more sources are simply becoming adequate for any possible use to which they can be put. Meaning that at that point, it's no longer about the amplifier. The amplifier is just a device that takes a signal on one end and produces a signal on the other end that is bigger, but otherwise resembles the first. So in a way, in a way, there is the amplification in itself is only going to become much more humdrum, much less exciting a topic of discussion than in the past. Because I mean, if the amplifier has negligible distortion, it has a negligible impact on the sound, so it sounds the same going out as coming in, and it's compact and it's efficient. Well, what else can you want from an amplifier?
Yeah, compact it is. You have designs that are just like a lunchbox form factor instead of these bulky 200 kilogram amplifiers.
Exactly, and nowadays it's in particular the power supply that is actually taking up most space. Yeah. The amplifier itself is becoming smaller and smaller, and of course I still enjoy doing these things. So it's not because I said it's not an exciting topic of for nattering audiophiles that it's not interesting to do. But what I'm saying is that as an audiophile, as a music listener, lover, the things we should be looking at are of a completely different nature than simply what is inside that little box.
Yeah, but you're talking about distortion, and the numbers are all getting better and better. But can you translate that into what we hear? What does it mean if an amplifier has less distortion?
Well, if you start with let's say amplifiers as they existed several decades ago, when distortion figures weren't low, and anyway, even most amplifiers being sold in hi-fi actually do not have vanishingly low distortion. At that point, it is very difficult to actually say, these are the measurements, and therefore this amplifier will sound like that. That's because is simply the kinds of the ways in which distortion can arise are so varied, and if you simply do a measurement, different distortion mechanisms can throw up fairly similar test results, whilst sounding very different. This is why so many people say, I don't care about measurements. They say nothing about the sound. Well, measurements don't. What measurements can tell you something about sound, which is that if the measurements are spectacularly good, then you know that the circuit you're measuring will have no sound of its own at all.
Yeah.
But if the measurements are not spectacularly good, they will not actually tell you what it will sound like, unless you study it with absolutely excruciating detail. In which case, I would say, well, just listen to the bloody thing instead of staring at the data. So it means that if you are, for some technological reason, limited to rather mediocre performance, and you cannot get distortion and all the other aspects of performance to stratospheric levels, then essentially you the only thing you know is that the thing will have a sound, but you cannot know what that sound will be. You may hazard a few guesses, but it'll only be like rough idea. But if you do get super low distortion, super low noise, super low output impedance, and so on, then at that point you know that all amplifiers that have that degree of performance will be good to listen to, and will not significantly alter the sound. But on the other hand, subjectively, of course, if you are doing Class D amplifiers, then the types of distortion mechanisms that you're dealing with are always the same. So if you figure out a way of getting 10 times more negative feedback around the amplifier, then it's all the same distortion that drops just by a factor of 10, and then you can indeed show a trend saying, well, UCD sounded a bit like that, and Encore sounded a bit more so, and then you do see a line, which is that progression with the combined typical distortion characteristics of Class D is going from sort of somewhat hazy and grainy sound to becoming ever clearer, but also ever warmer. So the funny thing is, completely distortion-free sound is actually quite warm, because you get the warmth that is in the music, which is often masked. And supposedly low distortion amplifiers that don't sound warm, well, actually, if you do a few more measurements, you quickly find out what's wrong with it. Because if it is truly low distortion, then the sound will become very emotional and very engaging, because you just got to looking straight to what's on the recording.
Yeah, and that should be the goal, right?
It definitely should. And in the case of an amplifier, I would say that actually the problem is not that complicated, because as I said, it's a one-dimensional problem. You've got an input signal, you've got an output signal. Do they resemble each other? And in actual fact, you can do this as a listening test. So say you have some audio signal, and you just record record what's going into the amplifier, and you record what's coming out of the amplifier, and then you just have two audio recordings, and you can compare those by ear.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the old Hafler trick of subtracting them and listening to what the exact difference is. No, you just compare them by ear. Can you hear a difference between what went into the amplifier and what came out? There is never a discussion about, I go to classical concerts and this doesn't sound like a real classical concert to me, because then we're talking about all the production and the rest of the signal chain. But if you simply A/B between this is the signal that was fed into the amplifier, this is the signal that came out, and hey, the difference is really, really, really tiny, then you know that this is a good amplifier.
Yeah. Beside the form factor, there's also pricing. Real high-end amplifiers from years ago were very bulky and very expensive, but now, the best class D amplifiers sound awesome. They sound great, but they're very affordable, very reachable for everyone.
That is actually something that the particularly the high-end audiophile industry has serious trouble getting its head around. Is that high performance amplification is becoming a commodity, and for me that's always been a stated aim. I always wanted to turn amplification, high performance amplification, into a commodity, so that it's that you can just use wherever you need an amplifier. Okay, we'll take one of those. They'll do.
Yeah.
And so very often, especially when we started with Encore, that was the first moment that really very high end amplifier companies started to sit up and take notice, and the initial products that came out were bulky, expensive amplifiers with this tiny little Class D amplifier in it. But of course, at the same time, there were like a sort of a new generation of hi-fi companies, people who actually started their company doing nothing but just buying modules and packaging them up in boxes and selling them for a perfectly acceptable price.
Yeah.
So and then you get you get people ringing me up and saying, "Hey Bruno, we've got a problem. How do I differentiate my 10 grand amplifier from their 2 grand amplifier that uses the same module?" And all I can tell them is like, look, that's your own lookout. I didn't. You're the one who is still building dumb amplifiers and hoping that you can and hoping that you can somehow keep people's attention whilst doing so. And I mean, we are seeing the same thing with D2A converters as well. That a bunch of newer companies, actually also particularly from the Far East, are putting out very respectable products at very low prices. Same thing is happening. Is the traditional high end industry is on the back foot.
Mm-hmm. And if they need to differentiate, like you say, they'll probably end up making the amplifier or whatever product sounding worse, because they need a certain sound signature that is not in line with the original.
Yes, that is very often the case. And for instance, you know that there's this whole big deal in users of Class D audio. What type of input buffer are you using? Mm. That was actually something I started on purpose. At some point when we were still doing UCD modules at IPEX, I said, how about just selling modules that don't have an input stage at all, so that you have something with low gain that you need to drive pretty hard to get it going, to give people the opportunity for sprinkling their own fairy dust on the on the circuit, and that actually took off to a degree that it's because that the input buffer of a Class D amplifier has become such almost a cultural item that I'm getting rather annoyed with myself that I actually started the whole thing.
Well, you can end it.
Yeah, easily.
You start some, you end some.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, no. Sometimes you let something loose and into the collective psyche, and it gets a life of its own. And you just have to laugh at it and live with it, because on the whole, I mean, it is a sideshow. The real question is still like is putting is a box with a mains input, an XLR input, and a pair of speaker terminals. Is that still a viable product at all in our current market? And I would actually say no, because if you take, for instance, one of the very first products that use an Eigentakt module was the NAD M33.
Yeah.
So very clever piece of kit.
Yeah.
So it has streaming on board conversion. It's like one box. You connect a pair of speakers on it, and you've got a sound system.
Yeah.
And it's got some processing. It's even got some room EQ in there. And the fact that it uses a particular amplifier module is almost incidental to the product. That's the idea. It's the amplifier itself is a commodity. So I've got this idea for this all-in-one sound system. Mm-hmm. What amplifier shall we put in there? Well, that one will do.
Yeah.
Those products still have added value that's been put there by the manufacturer whose brand is on the front.
Yeah.
That's true added value. It's more than just it's more than just the amplifier. And if we take it even a bit further, we can talk about active loudspeakers, because the in a way. I'm not sure I'm going to make myself very popular with that, but I think I've already gone on record stating it, is that the compartmentalization of audio into separate boxes. Like you've got a CD transport or a streamer, you've got a DAC, maybe with a separate power supply if you think that's better, and then you have a preamplifier. And a power amplifier and speakers and so on. That compartmentalization, that in my view only exists because of the way the hi-fi market functions, which is people are no longer so much interested in what the sonic result is that they achieve in their home, but they are interested in the upgrade path. So they just bought a new DAC last year. So now they're looking at a new preamplifier or a new power amplifier, mm-hmm. and even the way that margins are structured in hi-fi shops, that's built in because very often the hi-fi dealer will buy back the original product at half price to keep it off AudioGon or eBay or something like that. And they will then make sure that it gets sold on, and then they'll sell their customer a new but essentially equivalent.
I think we can talk more about this in our next episode, because we're already touching the future of Class D amplification. And as you already said, there is no real future. It's just ongoing refinement. But in this last episode, we'll talk more about how the amplifier will change the industry. And you just already touched it barely, but let's dedicate a whole episode on that. So thanks for joining us. This was the present about Class D amplification. Thank you for watching.